When it comes to the risk, we have and handle so many distressed properties, right? And so that can go a couple of ways, whether it's partial interest that's missing or judgments that were missed, federal tax liens, all those good things, they pop at the table. Or once the file comes across my desk. So it's real important that they're doing their research on the properties before. So what I've noticed, before I established my team, I was processing everything by myself in full, and that allowed me to control the product. So I could see it, I could remember it, I would know what I'm walking up against. My clients are very good with letting me know what I'm actually walking into. So I know how to actually mitigate the risk itself. If I don't know what's going on, it's hard for me to get that clear to close from underwriting for you all. But I guess it also depends on your book of business. So like with distressed property, that becomes a little bit more extensive to where like some title companies don't even want to touch those deals.
You usually close 50 to 100 files every single month and have only had 2 claims out of 14 years. How's that even possible?
Thorough. You have to be very thorough and know what you're looking for.
Montiel, most people hear the word title company and think paperwork, not pressure. But you lead a team where every file is basically a minefield, and one wrong move could cost a whole lot. With only 2 claims written in about 14 years, you've basically rewritten with precision and integrity what it could look like to run a title operation. And I would suspect it's probably one of real estate's most misunderstood parts of the business. This isn't about closing your contracts. This is about discipline, risk, and kind of waging a quiet war fought behind the scenes to get people's property transactions to close. Welcome to Dirty Deeds, Montiel. We're going to talk about your job today.
Thanks for having me.
You got it. You usually close 50 to 100 files every single month and have only had 2 claims out of 14 years. How's that even possible?
Thorough. You have to be very thorough and know what you're looking for.
So that's something that happens behind the scenes when these investors are like trying to cut a deal, make it happen, move fast. They don't realize that every single little thing is being looked at so that you don't lose your license, get sued, get a train wreck.
That's exactly right.
What's the risk that most people don't see coming in these deals, and what's the mistake that can blow up?
So when it comes to the risk, we have and handle so many distressed properties, right? And so that can go a couple of ways, whether it's partial interest that's missing or judgments that were missed, federal tax liens, all those good things, they pop at the table. Or once the file comes across my desk. So it's real important that they're doing their research on the properties before.
You said the most controversial part of your business is the claims process, because at the end of the deal, all the risk lands on you guys. How do you make sure everything has been looked at and nothing has been missed?
So what I've noticed, before I established my team, I was processing everything by myself in full, and that allowed me to control the product, right? So I could see it, I could remember it, I would know what I'm walking up against. My clients are very good with letting me know what I'm actually walking into. So I know how to actually mitigate the risk itself. If I don't know what's going on, it's hard for me to get that clear to close from underwriting for you all.
Gotcha. You're not just managing an escrow team, you're managing risk, law, and lives are tied to broken property. Gosh, I've never really thought about it like that. When you say it like that, it sounds like it's a lot more than title insurance and escrow services, right?
Right. But I guess it also depends on your book of business, right? So like with distressed property, that becomes a little bit more extensive to where like some title companies don't even want to touch those deals.
You know what? That's interesting. That makes me think of when my wife worked at a title company a long time ago. There was a large national wholesaler, and she would tell me how many files they brought every month. And then one day she came home and she said, "We fired them." I was like, huh? And it turns out that type of work for that office was actually bad business, they thought.
Right. And figuring out a flow for it is like, I think the hardest thing in my career that I've experienced, right? General title companies, they have like a one set escrow officer that has like a couple of assistants. Here we do it as a team. So you have title, which more so I'm like a title examiner in my position and role at the title company. So you have your title that does the processing and clears it for closing for the escrow team, which a lot of the people don't see the difference between title and escrow.
You know, you're right, actually. So escrow is basically fees, the money part of the transaction, paying mortgages, sending creditors payments, sending seller proceeds. That's the escrow part.
Correct.
And then the insurance includes underwriting, issuing a title policy,
Free and clear.
dealing with a bunch of legal stuff.
Yep.
A lot of people think like, this is how I get paid. Send the contract in the title. Well, it is how you get paid and it's how you sell, but those are two very specific things. A lot of people, I don't think, even realize that title insurance is it's basically directed in the insurance codes. It's like a codified set of laws here. So what y'all do is like, it's standardized so much so that even the fees are standardized.
Correct.
Like in other states, I don't know that it's quite like that. Like I think people can charge radically different rates, but in here, like title insurance is this and the fees don't really change much. They're promulgated, I guess.
Yeah, each state's kind of different depending on what state you're working out of, what that insurance code looks like, how you're saying the codified.
And the only fees that I notice really change are not the insurance premium, but the escrow fees.
Yes, here in Texas, that's how you'll see our fees fluctuate. A lot of what people don't understand is the time and work that goes into these distressed properties.
Oh, dude.
So my escrow fee is a little bit higher for the care and the quality of work that we produce.
I'll never forget there was a transaction we were doing that was in Comal County, and a realtor just raised all kinds of trouble. And she said, well, they only charge $150 for escrow fees over here. And I remember this was like a couple $100,000 transaction. And I was like, what are you talking about? So the difference between like 100 to 400? And she's like, yeah. And I was like, why do you care? If you have an office that'll take care of you, that'll do the work and that knows you and has your information and you like, why do you care about $300? And I think in that moment, she said she was an experienced agent, been in a long time. And I think in that moment, she kind of realized how stupid she sounded when she was picking over a couple $100. But that extra fee, in my opinion, is well worth the extra attention. Don't argue. Now, you guys get it from both sides. But at the end of the day, like, title companies have to make a living. They have to provide a service. They got to get paid. Like, everyone's got to be able to pay their bills and make a little money.
Right.
I think a lot of people miss that.
They do. And then, like, they also don't see, like, the behind the scenes on, like, losses that we take. Us at the title company, we are also human, right? So say we have a tax payoff that's going out at the end of the month. But my escrow team, they close on the 30th and tomorrow's the 1st. The tax office isn't going to honor my check from the 30th. They're going to want interest including through the 1st because that's when they receive it. So a lot of the times the clients don't get that kickback because for me, that's an escrow error. They should have collected. They should have caught it.
So it might only be $200, but you guys are going to have to pay it.
Right. And that's our job. That's what our insurance is for. So like if it's an error that we're doing, of course, that is our responsibility. That's the purpose of the policy.
Oh, wow. I guess I hadn't thought about that part. So tell me about what your role looks like in a title company right now. Because for what I understand, it's evolved over the years, right?
Yes. And so when I first started in title and escrow, I was an assistant, but I worked my way up.
How long ago was that, roughly?
14 years.
Oh, my gosh.
So I worked my way up. I learned every single desk. I was with the first team that I worked with for 5.5 years. And I had read this article in Forbes, and they had stated, don't leave a company until you're capped at knowledge. And that kind of resonated with me. It's like I can learn. If I'm still learning and still growing, this is still a valuable place for me.
Sometimes we want to leave because of the money, but the way they get worth the money is continuing to get smarter.
Exactly. And just mentor. Like you have a mentor that you can work under that can show you their ways. I have a couple. I have an attorney mentor. I had an escrow officer mentor that was really great. She actually helped the transition into the investor world because a lot of y'all's contracts are different, right? So going from resale or like a cookie cutter, I was at the builder for a couple of years, pardon me. And it was so cookie cutter, guys, that my brain felt capped. Like I was so bored and I felt stagnant. And so when I decided to leave to go resell and continue to grow, it was because my background was curative.
So you were doing, oh, wow. So if you're working with a builder, they're literally the same forms, the same everything.
Could do it in my sleep.
Oh my gosh.
Yes.
Well, the neat thing is you can get to a smooth sailing point where things get really easy. But the other part is, you ain't going nowhere after that.
Well, yeah, but then you work, right? You create this beautiful book of business that wants to follow you, but you have to pour back in and give back. So my team is the only way that I am able to do 50 to 100 files.
Wow.
And you have to be able to like put into your people. Like if you want your team to succeed and be able to create your legacy and what you've worked for, you have to pour into them.
So then when you left the builder, what was your next role?
I went to resale. I worked under Vicki Novak at Netco Title. She was my mentor. She'd been doing it for years. She taught me boundaries with investor and kind of like the do's and the don'ts. Wholesales, like you're not going to mix.
But why do you need boundaries with the clients?
Well, boundaries are really important, especially with distressed. A lot of the time people get confused that we're attorneys, right? Let me just call the title company. I don't need to pay for an attorney. They'll just tell me what I need to do. But technically, we aren't allowed to do that. We have laws that we have to abide by, too, that protect our license and protect us in the event they go to claim.
Right. So your license is insurance, title insurance. That's specific.
Correct. And then you pick up the phone, you work with your attorneys, right? A lot of the attorneys, they'll go off of the code, but the title company, the difference, right, is we're mitigating risk between what they see in law and what we've had to pay out in claims with case study. Combining the two.
And a lot of times the lawyers may not even understand that part at all.
Right.
All the lawyers like to say they do. Half of them say they know everything, and they are not God. They don't know it all, but they still think they do. But you get this whole other area where things go wrong, people come back, mistakes happen, things are missed, and those mistakes equal dollars. Lawyer over here saying, this is what the law says. And you're like, yeah, that's all fine and dandy, but when it happens in the real world, this is what happens, and I got to pay.
Right.
So that's those are like completely separate things.
Right. And like interpretations, right? Everyone has their own interpretation of things. So, you read something and you register
This is what the law says.
Right. Okay, well, this is what the law says, but when this law goes to court, what are the other laws that go with it? What are the other pivots that the judge is going to ask? Did you do this, this, and this?
And what actually happened?
Exactly.
Yeah, and I guess in an early day, you could probably hear about those things, but the result isn't very clear to you because you haven't seen it. But after being in it long enough now, you get to see like the problem, the fight, the result.
Right.
And you get to make decisions on that now.
Yeah. And the good thing is when we present to underwriting, I love Stewart Title, right? They're my guarantee company. They're my favorite underwriter to use just because in our classes where we're working with them, their job is to get you to a yes. So although it may not be a yes, your way is right, it's a yes, we can do this, but here are the things that we need you to do to mitigate it.
That's way more pragmatic. I feel like if you were to ask me that about a lot of other companies, I would feel like they don't have a goal to get you to a yes. They look at it and say, this works or this doesn't.
Exactly.
They don't say, okay, this doesn't. How do we figure it out? So that's and I'm actually not surprised because Stewart is one of the big title underwriters, but they're still very pragmatic. I noticed once the title companies get really big, they're willing to take zero risks, solve zero problems. They don't give a crap. And I think that's because title insurance is the only kind of insurance based on like fact pattern that is known. All the other insurance, like auto insurance, is based on a potential problem or a risk in the future. Here, you guys have what happened. How do we manage our risk down on this because it's known?
Exactly.
I never really thought about it like that. I like to hear that actually. But that makes sense because they're the big underwriter that I'm still comfortable working with, even though we've had every kind of mess under the sun.
Right. And they're willing to hear it. Like if I can mitigate the risk enough and use the law with the attorneys that are working with the clients, then I am able to present that to the underwriter in a way that they understand. That's a big downfall at these title companies too. The escrow officers don't know how to present to underwriting to mitigate the risk. So if you don't understand what you're talking about, how can you mitigate it?
Them
exactly.
In the early days when I was trying to like piece all these different things together, there was a lot of like whys, and there was never like a final answer. It was always because of this. Why? Because of this. And there was this point, I don't really remember when it happened in my career, but I started to have these like epiphanies, I guess, and light was going off often. And I started to understand, there's a problem, but there is a solution, or there's something that's not going to be fixed. But if the risk or there's a probability that it could happen. Is it possible? Yes. Is it probable? No. So like, yes, a person could show up. Like, let's say, for example, there's someone in the title chain from 1910. Everybody else conveyed out of this deal. And down the line, everyone continued to convey. So there's no missing. But there was a missing person or heir back in 1910 or an owner. And there have been title insurance policies written after that, and no one's surfaced since then. That side of the family died off. You think, is it possible? Yes. Is it probable? No. That person is not going to have a kid that's going to come make a claim 100 years later, and there's been 3 or 4 title policies written. I say, wow, like,
Well,
this
they also
really is a
need
risk thing.
Right. Well, they also need to know the statute for that. So there's statutes in which time.
So then you might say it's been 4 years, the statute of limitations
There you
on
go.
this or that. And you say, no way it's going to happen. No claim's going to be made. So at that point, I remember thinking it could happen, but the probability is so small, it's like 0. And we started to buy things without title insurance around that time. And I remember starting to almost self-act as an examiner and underwriter and say, am I willing to take that risk? And when we started to do that, I really started to understand y'all's business in a far different way, I think.
Yeah. And that makes sense. You know, there's a lot of times where the understanding of what we do is just so misconstrued, right? Like people think we're like you're saying,
What do they
pushing
think
paper.
your job really
Right?
is?
They just push paper, you know, they're not. But honestly, with the book of business that you go after, that's tailored towards your client. But I will say I had a client that gave me, and he's one of my greatest clients as well out of Houston. I align with you in that manner. But he pushed me. So when I would give him no's and tell him no's, Montiel, why? Show me. Let's go through the virtual underwriter. And I would spend hours digging with him. And he would say, Montiel, you've spent 20 minutes here. What did you find? And I'm like, well, I'm looking at what you're looking at. And he's like, okay, well, how can we get around underwriting? What can we, present? Because we don't see anything here. There's nothing in. And he went as far as going to my TDI basic manual, my Stewart Title virtual underwriter, and the property and estates code, civil practice code, whatever code. Yes. And he helped me get better at my job. But where most people would fold and say, I don't want that client, I appreciated it. Just as though y'all, it's a different type of, client base, what y'all do. And, you and your teams, y'all have mastered what people are trying to learn from attorneys. Yeah. So that within itself and y'all's integrity mitigates that risk for us a lot as a title company.
We've had a couple of times where we've had claims made on deals that we've been a part of. And I remember trying to understand what the right answer was. And I immediately asked myself, okay, what's going to happen? I always ask, what's going to happen if this? And after you ask that about all the probable situations, then you decide which one do you think you want to put your money on. And I remember one time saying, oh gosh, there's a claim here. We didn't do anything wrong. And it was just, I don't remember exactly what the cause was, but I thought, well, what are we going to do? Are we going to make a title insurance claim? Then I remember asking myself, what if we do? Is this company going to say, if first it's a small claim, maybe no one cares that much, $10,000, whatever. What if it's a big claim, like $250,000, $400,000? If the title company has to pay that, great. We didn't risk taking any loss. But the title company, which is where we clear our sales through and is literally the last bottleneck in our revenue channel, what if they say, you know what? We made a $400,000 claim to them. We know that they do kind of messy deals. I don't know that we want to accept their business anymore. Do I care about that one deal or do I care about my next 400 deals? Oh shit. And when I looked at it that way, I remember thinking, this wasn't even my problem. I can't remember if it was mine or the title company's or whose, but it wasn't solely mine. But I remember thinking, let me call this person that's saying they're going to make a claim or file a lawsuit. Let me try to settle with them. And specifically, one of them, I recall settling someone for $12,000. Could I have made a title claim? Yeah. But at the end of the day, $12,000 is not really that big of a deal considering how many files we do and the kind of revenue. I just remember making a decision saying, let me pay this and get it done. And it is no problem to the title company whatsoever. It's not that big a deal to us. I was still profitable in that deal, just shrunk my margin. But now I have trust and confidence from people like you. And most customers won't do that. And I remember specifically going through that effort saying, I think this is going to differentiate us from a lot of other people. And instead of the title company not liking us, they'll now have a higher degree of respect for us instead of going the other direction.
Yeah. And to touch on that, so my view on that, personal view on that, is if you're going to run your purchase outside of title, then that's you saying, like you're saying, I'm underwriting it myself. You're taking that product and you're deciding to not get the protection that I would be able to pay out for you in the event we miss. But that's, that stretch of thin air or that gray area where people are like, hey, pay this claim, to where I almost cut a client that I've worked with for 4 years based off that. It was a policy that was issued, a $30,000 policy. Super, super small, right?
Oh, man.
But the claim itself was $30,000. And he took the policy outside of title and then brings it to us. Our underwriters miss it. We insure the end buyer, and he gets hit with the settlement.
And now you ask yourself, did this guy know about this problem?
Exactly.
Was he just trying to send it through to see if he could slide under the radar?
Right.
Or was it just a legitimate mess up? Either way, I don't know if I want to do that again. Here's the other thing.
But it stands with that is, like you're saying, the repetitive client relationship. I believe him so much because of his integrity that when I had that tough conversation and he told me, I truly did not know, how I work.
I believed him.
I believed him. Because out of 4 years, that's how long I've worked with him personally, I have not seen one claim come across my desk.
It's fair. So then if you step back again for a few thousand feet further back and look down, you say, so let's say this person runs 2-3 files a month through me. I don't know, a couple. Mm-hmm. But over the course of a year, it might be 10 or 20 or maybe 30. I don't know. Mm-hmm. Over multiple years, they might run 100 files through me. And let's say I make $2,000 to $3,000 a file if they're not big ones. Mm-hmm. They might bring in $200,000, $300,000, $400,000 in revenue per year, or maybe over 3 years. Mm-hmm. But that's substantial. Now, if you have to pay, let's say they bring in $200,000 in revenue, and you have to pay out $30,000. You look at that, you and everybody else in the office that makes those decisions, and you say, is it worth it or not? Does this trust affect more than just this?
And are our boundaries strong enough?
Right.
Right. So I did have that conversation as well. Like, okay, this is where we're at. We're going to continue to do business. This is how I personally feel. And I'm going to, if we make if we miss, bring me that, of course, you're going to have a double policy. Right.
Yeah.
But my personal stance on that, with everything that I've built over my book of business and the career that I've established, I'm not willing to throw it away or jeopardize my whole book of business based off one client's decision.
I think a lot of consistent, common title company customers may not think about it quite like that. Mm-hmm. I bet they don't.
I don't think they do either. But it's a business relationship. At the end of the day, if the title company can trust you, it changes how we handle, there's a more lax, you know what I mean? There's some ease that goes into processing that, because we've done XYZ transactions. Anytime I ask any of my clients for anything, here you go.
Straightforward.
They don't withhold.
Man, I always ask myself this, probably once every 5 or 6 months, we'll have a deal that's just a train wreck, and it crosses my mind, and I still never acted on this, but it crosses my mind. I say, I'm just going to ask the title company if they'll say, fuck it, and insure this, and let's just take this risk together. And that's the easy road. Mm-hmm. If I were to take that, route, otherwise I say, all right, guys, no. Go find this, go pay this, go do this, go figure this out. And we still go back to doing it right. But I ask myself someday, when is that time where I'm just going to say, fuck it, let's just take a run at it. And I hope they'll take that run at it with me. I don't
know. We'll have to chat about it, Logan.
Yeah, you don't ever know. I had a title attorney way long time ago. He was looking at some of our smaller deals in our early days. And I remember him saying, he was explaining this to me. This is when I started to build some understanding here. Mm-hmm. To Logan, why would I take a risk of having some big claim, and you're selling a $30,000 lot? My total fees might be $1,500, but if something goes wrong, I could be paying tens of thousands of dollars. And then he said, let me give you an example. There was a deal in Austin that had some weird affidavit of heirship. Mm-hmm. But it was like a $6 million big mansion house downtown, old historic thing, right by the Capitol. Mm-hmm. And he said there was a problem with their estate and this and that, and he had all this stuff. But he said, Logan, it's like a $50,000 title insurance policy. And I think it's very low odds that anything goes wrong with this. I'm going to make that call to make $50,000 on one deal as opposed to $1,500. Mm-hmm. And I remember walking away from that. That was in that time where I'm starting to feel all this out. I remember thinking, geez, that's how this works. And it really helped me understand this is insurance, this is risk. And he was one of those attorney offices that wrote the policy. So he literally had the ability to take on that risk and make the decision himself.
Yeah. And then he can indemnify anyone going forward that may try to sell that property.
Yeah.
And continue to take that risk.
No a lot of folks that are either new or they're not even this close to the escrow side have no clue about that.
I know.
So you don't have to tell me any names.
Okay.
Tell me about your worst client.
Okay. So I'm just going to generalize.
Spill the beans.
Generalize.
Because they might be listening.
Yeah. Let me just generalize. So for me,
but the reason I'm asking is because I'm trying to help educate people, like what makes a shithead client, what makes a good client, and that's why I'm asking.
So for me, it's just when they anticipate us to be able to be their attorney, their lender, their agent, all in one type shop. Like we have boundaries.
Unrealistic expectations.
Exactly. Unrealistic.
And they're being cheap. To make it worse, unrealistic expectations and then cheap.
Yeah, and on top of that, you want me to do all of this and cut my escrow fee and ask me to not charge a notary fee. But then you're going to get mad at my staff because production stops to go in and notarize for you, or you don't want to pay that fee. And then you're complaining about them not answering you, but they're at the table with your client. So it's those type of...
The sad part is, you know what that sounds like to me? A very common investor.
Yeah. It is more common than
I think
people
one of the
think.
reasons people really dislike dealing with a lot of single family property investors is because they're cheap.
Mm-hmm.
They never pay, they always pay too much for property. So they're trying to beat up the contractor, the title folks, they try to beat up everyone along the way to make a little profit. It's like, if you'd get better at buying your shit right, you wouldn't be trying to beat everybody up along the way and cause yourself to be a crummy client.
Right. Or learn your property, like you're saying, know the property you're going after. A lot of the times we get wholesalers that'll bring us a contract. They don't have any idea about curative. They contract and they end up wholesaling and contract to an end buyer, which it's going to take 2 months to curate. But you contracted. Now you're mad at us because we can't get this, but you don't even know that there's an estate in play.
A train wreck.
Right. But you want to click our heels. Here you go. But that's not how it works. In reality, like, setting the clear expectations up front. So what I've learned in my experience is when I tell the new clients coming on board what I expect and what they expect in return, you can kind of tell off of an initial email and interaction on if it's going to be a good fit. If they're willing to hear what benefits you or how you would prefer to flow, because it's going to essentially benefit everyone, then that's a beautiful client to us. A client that's willing to work with us in those extents. But like we have some clients who will just send us an email. We have 7 files with them. No subject line, no attachment, no property address. Here you go. And the file's already been, yes. And it's just like, it's the little things, guys. That's really all it is. Like we don't have any problem performing under pressure. I feel that is where we're different as well. We don't give up. So like for me, at the end of the day, if you can respect the work that goes into it, then you'll understand when we're giving you those updates and what's going on your property.
I wonder if there's a way to help educate a new or a typical customer that's not like that doesn't understand this stuff already. If there's a way to simply educate them, it might increase the probability of it being easier for you because there's some way to educate them on this stuff that they would otherwise never get unless they have just a bunch of experience.
Well, some people don't even understand like the different with processing because my team's so different and we process as a team. Like some of the investors get mad when they don't have one designated person. Like,
and they're hearing from multiple people.
Yeah. And it's like, I have a whole team to support you. And like, we're all here, but you're upset that I don't have just one designated person. With the volume that we intake there, it's not realistic. I personally was handling 20 files with, some sanity. I'll say some because it was not a lot there, but you have to think like we receipt these contracts, we receipt the money. Where does that go? It goes into a system, right? We have to data input everything that's on that contract to make sure all correspondence is clean.
Yep.
Then we have to receipt out the contract, make sure all the money comes back. So you want your one designated person
to do all these roles.
Yep.
That's interesting. Yeah, it doesn't work so easily.
No.
I'm going to change gears a little bit. I just got to thinking a little bit more broadly about this. I had a conversation with a guy earlier about Oklahoma. So you guys are now able to do transactions outside of Texas. I think we have a couple outside of Texas that are closing with you right now. Ryan mentioned that we had some in Georgia. Kyle mentioned we had some in the Carolinas, I think. Does that sound right?
Not with us right now. I know that they've mentioned processing. I'm trying to get Ryan.
Then maybe we're in the middle of purchasing them then.
Yeah, because I haven't received any of the contracts from the national. I did have some hiccups, right? So when we decided to go national, we already had an underwriter in place that we use for that product. My preference, again, is Stewart. So we're still working on getting them onboarded because with investors, turn time is everything.
Right.
So what we've found is that with these national closings, it's taking forever to get that title product back. They'll tell us they'll get it to us in 2 to 3 days. They'll tell us they'll get it
And
to
how
us
long
in
would it take?
2 weeks on my North Carolina. The first deal I ran through North Carolina took 3 weeks. On top of that, their commitment came back not fully typed. So it's like we don't even have a clean product to push our product because our underwriter on who we're working with at the time,
that's tough.
It's not basic value.
So right now y'all are working through some of that process.
Yes. So we're trying to get it cleaned up so that way we can streamline to have that same process nationally. Because again, I love the curative. So like going national for me is just, it's a game. So let's play. But that's for me really the difference. The difference is if I'm going to sell a product to you all, it's going to be a clean product and it's going to have that same standard because my standards are super high.
That makes sense. Mm-hmm. I think I know the answer to this, but I'm going to ask it for the benefit of others.
Okay.
Why does an out-of-county, first off, what is an out-of-county report and why does the out-of-county typically take longer?
So out of county just means that we don't have access to the title plant. They're keeping everything in that county to kind of control it.
Like a little racket.
Right. It allows the money to stay within the smaller counties. But what I found is that the smaller counties are also not willing to dig into the work that requires, like, I have one that's right now between a property line, right? And the title company that we've requested from 3 different ones, they're saying they're not willing to insure because they can't put it together. Properties was recorded in the wrong county, but it's situated in the other. And for me, that is whoa, yes, let's do it. I can fix that. Yeah. That's something that's fixable.
Right.
But these out-of-county smaller companies that want just the straight resale because it's maybe 2 local companies there, that's not worth it for them. Why are they going to spend all their time abstracting and trying to put together the land?
Dude, that means you're stuck. That means you're in a spot where if they don't want to write this, then who's going to do it? And then they control the county.
So my pivot, I have a title plant vendor that actually has access to those 2 counties. So any vendor that I run, right, I then become the examiner on that product for the title company.
Gotcha.
So once it comes in, I have to pretty much examine, put the legal description together, get it to my underwriter then at that point.
There's a lot more risk in that.
Yes. Mm-hmm. So those ones, they're fun. If you mitigate the risk and you look at the bigger picture and you see it and it's clear, it's clear cut. Okay, they just forgot to record. It's right on the line. There's no risk there. It's just a human error.
Go record these docs, get certified copies of these docs, record it in the other county, and you're probably okay.
That's exactly right.
Huh.
Mm-hmm. Fixes. And then your chain's established, your tax bill then aligns. It's properly collecting in the right county.
Oh, so you might even have to go open a new CAT account over here or close this one, record over here, send it to them, and basically create a record for it.
Right.
Then, so I wonder, like, you guys are doing the work, so y'all obviously didn't close it. Mm-hmm. But I would wonder if, let's say a person didn't have access to y'all and they were just in that weird situation. I wonder if they were very sophisticated, understood all this. They went and did all that work and then called that title company and said, hey, would you look at this deal? And it pops up in the appraisal district. It's recorded in this county. I wonder if they would then see it as, oh, this will work.
So in my experience, they tell me no. Even whenever I add an attorney in there, like this one we're talking about, I add an attorney into the correspondence, right? And said, I have an attorney that's working on this file and is willing to see it across the finish line to help us with mitigating the risk. We just won't insure this product. No. And it was just a hard no.
The frustrating part is, like, they kind of have a monopoly there. You know what? You guys say y'all want this monopoly here. That's great, but don't exclude service from somebody. Right. Because for y'all to do it, it's going to be a lot more of a pain. It may be a lot less profitable because there's so much one-off work instead of a system for this. So that's kind of like it's nice that you'll do it for your customer, but that kind of sucks in a way.
Yeah, it sucks, but it also does create a business relationship. So now this gentleman who has this property in these counties, he's going to know that he can come to me for an easy one because I just took out the hard one.
Yeah, that makes sense.
But that's the thing too. So like, if we're going to create that business relationship, and I am killing myself on these properties for you all, I expect to still get the clean properties just as a, continued business relationship. It's hard to look at that and see like the value in it, right? When I'm killing myself on every one of your deals, but I know you're closing your clean, pretty deals with Fidelity or First American when it's the same issuance, right? Same policy. So that would be like something that I would say the clients could learn from.
We specifically look at that. We say, oh, here's an easy one. And like when we sell like maybe one of our bigger properties or something that we can control, we say, okay. Now, sometimes depending on the contract or the buyer or seller, sometimes it's hard, but like, you know, as we sell like our home, for example, we say, well, send it through them. This should be cake and much higher dollar value than a standard file. So like, this is a good layup. Hope this helps balance some of our tough times.
No, and so it's good because like for me also, like when you're looking at the bigger scheme, right? The risk for me again is also client based, your integrity, your relationship. I have guys where I tell them all the time, I'll still help you. I don't care where you're closing. It's not about getting that. It's just about how they value your relationship, I guess, on the bigger spectrum. You see what I'm saying? Like you go through these things with these people to prove, like, that's how I got my book of business. Like I worked so hard on the distress to get it. And for me, like it is like, I do not mind. Y'all want to close elsewhere? I will help you get that contract. What do you need here? What are they telling?
You're nicer than me. I don't know that I would be quite as nice.
Yeah, I do. But that also has its downfalls because we then don't get the product. Sorry.
Yeah, it's tough, man. Wow. Well, what I hope folks see out of this, if anybody really watching is mostly investor type or interested in becoming an investor, and I hope they look at this and understand what's happening in a title company, what their role as an investor outside of the title company should be, how to be a little bit better client probably, how to be more trustworthy, how to treat people better in their business. One of the comments that I made earlier, and I'll say it again, I asked people, go spend all of your time figuring out how to get the best deal you can on your deal. That way you can pay well or overpay your lawyers, your surveyors, your escrow folks, anybody who's involved in this, pay them well. They'll take care of you. They'll make things work well. They're going to answer your calls whenever you want it, and they'll go to bat for you. But if you overpay for that property, you hooked up one guy, the seller, who didn't give a shit about you anyway, and now you have to beat up everybody else that you're supposed to care about. It's way lopsided, which is, it's been a really big boon for us as we've spent time trying to figure out how to buy property from 10 to 50 cents on the dollar. I can afford to take care of everybody else and still make a couple bucks for myself.
And it's the business model. Like that's how you're saying, like you poured in, you took the time, like Logan, it wasn't all just here it is. You worked for it. We all worked for it. Like it's discipline and determined, like you cannot give up. Like I think that that's the thing too, is people don't realize that, like what work actually goes into what it is we do.
Ain't nothing free and nothing easy these days. Hey, you know what? Tell me and our listeners out there what a title claim policy or title claim looks like from the moment they find they got a problem. Like, let's say I'm just, I don't know, Joe Schmo investor. I buy a property, get a title insurance policy through you guys, and I go put a tenant in there, and I'm like happy, and I got it from a wholesaler. And then what happens if somebody shows up at my tenant's door and says, "What are you doing in my house?" And then that person gets a hold of me and says, "That's my house, not yours." I'm like, well, what the hell? Like, what would I do?
So each
what do I do next?
Yeah, so each underwriter and title company have their own process and how the underwriter handles the claim. At Stewart, like if you reach out to me, I have 7 days, I believe is the true turn time, in order for me to respond and reply to their actual claim itself.
Do most people call you because you're the point of contact,
Correct.
or do they look in their owner's title policy and call the number in there?
Most people call me, but they should be just reaching out directly to the policy department that's in the policy. It tells you how to file a claim. Like Stewart, you can go online and submit. At that time, the underwriter reaches out to me for discovery, and then I have to present the file to them. I had that one where we just ran the claim, and I actually run all of my product through the underwriter. So my initial product comes from Stewart. Stewart had missed on their run that initial item, and they asked, like, who do you use for your examiner? Who do you use? And I'm like, it's you guys. So all of that fell on them and their product.
Oh, so that was their part of the process, not your part of the process.
Correct.
So in that case, the escrow office doesn't really have quite as much at stake. It's more the policy issuer.
Well, it depends on who missed, right? So that miss was actually underwriting, but like supplemental taxes, things like that, that's going to fall on the title company, the escrow officer for the processing of it. They're going to pull it. They're going to see what they actually damages are owed and what they have to be paid. They're going to look and see what we processed and what we did wrong, what we took exception to on our policy.
Okay.
And then that's where we go from there on what we're
So
willing
then
to pay.
once you and Stuart have this discussion, y'all kind of put together a whodunit, kind of whatever, what's happening.
Now we're going to pay.
Then you do what? Well, then do you reach out to the insured?
Well, Stuart does. So Stuart handles everything from then, the settlement, any payments that are going to go out. We don't see it after that part. Like, it's completely out of sight, out of mind for us, unless it's where we have to go to court. I actually have one pending right now for court. Yeah.
So then I want to talk about that in a minute. But so then Stuart will reach out and say, all right, we're going to deny your claim, fuck off. Or they're like, you know what? We're going to pay. And in the example I gave, if someone knocked and said, hey, that's my house. Maybe it was one of 5 owners who sold and they got left out with a family, and that could be fraud on the family. I don't know. But maybe the Stuart would cut a deal with them and said, okay, this house worth $100,000, you own 1/5, let's pay you $15,000 or some number like that to go away. Okay.
Yeah.
Stuart might pay it, and now you got your house, and that deed that they bought ends up going to you possibly.
Right. Sometimes the title company I've seen where they've had to take back the asset.
That's where I was about to go next. So what if that person says, no, I own the whole house, or maybe I own, I don't know, a big piece of the house, and Stuart ends up having to pay a large dollar amount to it to cure that claim, or they might pay a big dollar amount to the property owner and say, property owner, I'm going to buy you out of that $100,000 that you paid, take off. Right. I'm going to take this house. And now Stuart might go litigate to try to solve the problem by suing the family who did a bad affidavit of heirship and excluded that family member knowing. But then the risk there is depends on who you're dealing with. You got 4 people. Are these people are their households equitable? Do they have any money? Are they professionals? Or are they someone who may not have any cash?
Right.
Stuart might not have a good claim against them because they're judgment proof.
Right. And then if the escrow officer continues to get claims, we run the risk of being dropped by the underwriter. And then there goes everything.
So if you get dropped by the underwriter, you might not get to write a Stuart policy.
Exactly.
But you might still be able to write like a fidelity policy.
Right. You get dropped per underwriter. So like Westcor, First American, whichever one you have in your pocket that your agency is under and approved through. Gotcha. They have the right to drop you as a client. So once those claims policies go up, they see you as a risk factor, not your client. So because you're the one closing.
What risks would y'all have at the state licensing level? Would it be the same licensing risk that like a lawyer would have, or CPA, or an engineer? You got your license with the state, and if someone makes a complaint against you to the state licensing agency, then that's where your license has risk.
Right. So at that point, we get a letter from them. They send it to us.
From the state agency.
TDI. They'll send us the complaint. We address the complaint and answer. And that's pretty much it, unless it's something crazy and like they've got to do an investigation and they want to look into it. But for the most part, they're willing to hear our side of the story as well. Yeah. You know, they trust us to issue it. When it's kind of like a brokerage, same amount of years. In order for you to open a brokerage, you have to hold your license 5 in order to get the title company to be registered with you. So that comes into play. They want to know all of your registered agents. You have to notify them any moves you make.
Everything.
Anything.
I've seen realtors get claims against them to the real estate board a lot, but I don't know that I can think of a single escrow officer that I've known or been near or even talked to that I'm aware of them getting a claim against them. That must, or a
complaint.
It must be a lot lower probability, huh?
Yeah, I mean, I've only seen one. First Option did receive one for one of the employees that we had there. It was pretty simple, though. The complaint was she's taken files from XYZ into her new company, and her rebuttal was, no, I have not. There's no transfers here. I have no amendment. Like, we there's nothing closed. But the title company that she had come from
they just wanted to pick a fight, basically.
Yeah, assumed that that's what happened.
Well, the good news is that nothing ends up happening. You can't prove it didn't happen and you get lost people, but they were probably just being spiteful.
Right. And it was simple. The attorney, First Option's run by an attorney to a real estate attorney. And so he was able to send the letter with some legal jargon included in it as well. But it's just the, response to what's going on. They just want to communicate with you, make sure everything's being handled.
So we talked about like the worst client. Maybe we've talked about favorite type clients. Why don't you tell me about like some of the worst files that you've done?
So I have this file where it's kind of caused me when you lessons, right? Anything where you mess up, you learn what not to go or what not to do, right? I had this file that was transferred to me when I was still at Netco a couple years back, and it was a POA closing, and it was a referral.
Okay, so hold on. So what people don't know is POA means a power of attorney. What that means is if I'm old and sick, or for whatever reason, maybe I'm a military on orders traveling, I give the power of attorney to, let's say, my brother, and my brother can act as me to go close a property sale with you without me being there. So that POA is what he's doing. Okay.
So there was a POA. He was referred to us just from distressed property. They had heard that we do distressed real estate. And he brings me the deal, and I verify the power of attorney. The power of attorney was a prison power of attorney. So it was all on a recorded phone line with the inmate's number that was verified. We get to the closing table. There was a revocation filed for the POA that was signed by the son, who did a self-serving POA in order to file that document of record, and then signed a deed into his name.
Oh, so it wasn't a good POA?
Our POA was good and verified at the time of closing, but the revocable that was filed in land records wasn't valid because of how it was executed for the benefit.
Oh.
So when we ran the property, the examiners missed the revocable POA. But still, because of the self-serving, all of the facts around it, the verification that I did on my end, the fact it was recorded, the questions that I asked, the title company that I worked for 4 years was willing to take that to court and stand on the work that I did, which makes me proud more than anything.
They're going to say you did the steps you're supposed to, you asked the questions you're supposed to, you got the correct answer. Someone just committed fraud, basically.
Exactly.
And
we're victims too, right? Like
right,
the title
that's
company.
What I'm saying. They defrauded you guys because they misrepresented, misappropriated information. They pretended like a different person.
Yeah. And when the VP called me, she was like, hey, the attorney is asking. She was like, we were getting ready to settle, but I told them we don't want to because your work is solid. Like, will you talk to him? And I was like, of course. Like, you know how that when you have invested everything in your life for something that you're doing or your career, right?
Yeah.
Like, you're calling me a lot. This man that's in prison is calling me a liar, right? On top of that, there's all these facts painted around this file where insurance fraud has already been committed by your son, who filed this of record. So it's like you're trying to continue to get paid out. So the ethics behind it and the integrity is what yeah. And she stood on it. She was like, I'm telling Stuart not to pay this, or I'm telling First American, or I'm telling whoever the underwriter was, do not pay. Like, we will look at the work.
So then how'd this end up in court? Does the dude who's in jail filed a complaint against the underwriter?
He sent in the mother of his son to the title company. I couldn't disclose or talk to them anything because I had already verified a POA that we closed with. So then he calls me back on the prison line to re-verify this POA. You learn to question people and kind of read people when you do what we do. And so I started asking questions around, he kept saying, okay, well, she used someone else to call. She used someone else. And I'm like, okay, well, does she know anyone else in prison? And he's like, no, she knows no one in prison. I'm like, okay, well, that kind of contradicts what you're saying because the phone number that was verified and recorded was this same phone number here from the prison. So you're telling me that she's conspiring against you with someone that you're locked up with, but you're telling me also she knows no one in there.
Yeah.
So it's really hard for me. Can you make that make sense? Because we still, again, neutral across the board. And if you're telling me you've been frauded, I have to get enough perspective to try and take that out and, get the other alternative. So when you're hearing these people and listening to their stories, you also have to have some common sense and know that not everyone's as genuine as you would wish that they would be.
So this happened how many years ago?
About 1.5, 2. That's right.
So a couple of years ago. So is this thing still ongoing?
Yeah. So it's just now to where she reached out maybe 2 weeks ago. And it was right around
the kid's mom.
The VP of the old company that I worked for.
Okay.
And she was letting me know, hey, we're at this point. They're getting ready to settle, but I am not here.
Oh, so they were going to settle with them for dollars, for basically payment. And now you're saying, we're going to withdraw our settlement because we think you're doing bad.
Right. And we're willing to stand on the work of our escrow officer.
Oh, so now what has to happen is if they don't like that answer, they're going to have to say, we're going to sue you, or we're just going to be quiet and go away.
Right.
Interesting. Lit strategy. So it's so interesting because you have to size up the opponent, the budget, the the grit that they have, all those things, along with the facts, along with all the other things that happen in the world, and say, how do I think this is going to look? And you're really making an assessment there.
Right. And then the $150,000 payout versus $30,000 in court fees that may be put on them because they were in the wrong party. Right. So your loss becomes a lot less. Than
that's a good point.
The payout.
I always wondered why title companies were almost always owned by a pile of lawyers. And the more I spent time in this business, the more I realized those are the folks that understand the way this works the best. You have salespeople, escrow people, and lawyers. That's the three people I see in here most of the time. So when you got in this business 14 years ago, you probably didn't even expect like this was the direction it was going. Would you ever imagine?
No, I recorded a deed before the property sold by like third week of work. And I'm like, I will never forget that ever.
Oh, wow.
So I was a funding assistant, and the escrow officer was like, yeah, it's good to go. But she wasn't listening to me when I had asked the question. So I filed it. Well, wasn't the right thing to do. Good thing we closed, but yeah.
Man, you can't remove a deed. You can file it. I've seen cancellation instruments that cancel a deed, but I don't think you can withdraw, or you can do a correction instrument.
Right.
But I don't think you can withdraw a filing from the land records, can you?
Sometimes you can beat them before they're filed.
Oh, and catch it.
Right before it goes and processes fully. And they can pull it from uploading to the records and then to the title plant.
Interesting. Huh. What's the first thing that happens when you get back a file from underwriter and you see all this stuff on the Schedule C, just lots of things. There are requirements to close, and not like having to turn in LLC documents or something. I mean like judgments, liens, I don't know, missing probates, like just questionable instruments in the title chain that don't work or problematic. Like, what's the first thing you do when this happens? Because the reason I'm asking this is folks that are out there doing deals, they they either email or walk a contract into you and drop it off. Say, here you go. You receipt that thing. They, prove that they turned in their earnest money, sign that form, and then it goes off into never land. It's going to get examined and underwritten and all that stuff. But once it comes back to you, what's the first step in your process so that folks that are out there working, so they know what this looks like? What happens when it hits your desk?
So it depends on the client. With your clients that are already in distress, the first thing I go through is the taxes and the estate. Like, what are we doing? Did we get everyone? For the most part, if they've filed all their deeds, it's going to come back under their name, right? So that's your first trigger. Once we see on a client that we know works estates or owners or whoever may own that property, then at that point in time, we are going to do a thorough review because there's rollbacks that we would be required for supplemental taxes in the event we miss. And our underwriters do look at that as our responsibility and our due diligence. So the first thing I do is mark up that file.
So you're kind of taking a look at it before you send it out. You're taking a little look over it and say, here's what I think is or is not before you send it out to the buyer and seller.
Right. Sometimes I have attorneys, they'll just send me an address and I pull my own property report online through the county records, and then I answer them and ask them, do you want me to run a property report? This is where I think we're at.
Gotcha.
But yeah.
And then once it goes out to them, you might have a conversation. I guess at this point, if it's got messes, you're probably taking a look at it. It goes out to them, then there's a conversation. And what's that look like?
So a lot of them hit me with code. If it's something that they feel can be released for the code. If you're going to use that argument in any type of scenario for me, you need to abide by that code in full. So like homestead designations, even child support liens, you'll see in the code, like they're referenced with that same homestead designation. For attachment on our commitments, it's going to say it doesn't. We still have to request that partial release of lien from them. But there are pivots in which we can take that will allow us to still help the investors if they did their job right. But they bring it to me after it's already been done or after they've made their judgment call based off their interpretation. And there's nothing I can do to fix it at that point, but
too late.
Yeah. And so it just depends on when I'm getting the product. If you're giving me the product at your purchase, that allows me to free reign, right? Like I have full control of that. I can help you. I can look at it. I can get you an attorney if you don't have one, or, here's some ones that we've worked with.
I think that's the right answer for folks that are getting into the distressed real estate business early on. Stay close to folks like you early on, quickly, and be really open about these things because that's how they're going to probably figure out how to deal with it more. That's one of the steps that we did a lot is between escrow and attorneys and just started, back and forth until we started to understand it. At this point, we don't do that at all. I know that it would be a little bit easier. Every once in a while, we'll run a question by y'all, but we think we understand how to do most of it. So we're not really getting any support. And 98% of the time, we think we got it all cleaned up. And then we run it through y'all. Sometimes just say, oh, well, here's a problem here or this or that. And it's either something we just totally missed or it's something that we thought we fixed right and didn't. So that's when that conversation is, well, here's why I think this. Well, here's why I think this. Something I tell people a lot of times is there is always an ultimate solve in the courthouse. Now, I don't know if it's going to benefit you or the other person, but when you take it in there in front of a judge and bring in all the things that are relevant, the judge is going to make a ruling and it's going to fix the problem. I just hope it fixes the problem in a way that you make money, not lose.
Right.
And that's something that's new to folks a lot of times.
Well, and it's like risk and reward, right? Like
it is. I always get this from people. So can I just go do a quiet title suit? I'm like, no, dude, there are 10 owners. You bought one interest in this property, or there's like hundreds of thousands of dollars of liens. No, a quiet title suit doesn't solve all problems. It solves a very narrow scope of problems. That's it.
Right.
But I guess the other question I always get is, can I just do adverse possession? Or no, I get that all the time. I can get it because of adverse possession. People think adverse possession means I want the property, you don't get it.
Right.
That's not what this means.
I actually had a lady walk in yesterday and she was like, I bought this property with two of my friends and I'm going to adverse possession out of their estate. And
First off, there's a Ouster statute that there's a specific way you can only adversely possess against co-tenants, but it's a very narrow thing. That's a relatively new law. Outside of that, you don't adversely possess against co-tenants. It doesn't happen.
Nope. And so she was trying to argue. She was like, the attorney told me if I could get a title company to close this. I was like, I'm unfortunately not that title company. I'm sorry.
Yes, if you can get a title company to close this, yes, you're right. But it ain't happening here and it probably ain't happening nowhere else.
Right.
Either.
And then I'll tell her too. I told her, I was like, I've closed with affidavits of this statute, like all the time, depending on the risk. But these people have owned the property from 83. They've paid taxes. They've lived there. There's been a divorce that references the property. There's just a break in chain. It's a little bit different on what we can get approved and what we're willing.
The quickest thing is to close that break of chain to solve the title problem.
Exactly.
You're trying to create a whole new title problem, say, this is mine. I want to bully my way into take it.
Right.
It
it's like a hostile takeover. That's how we look at it.
Oh, that's interesting. I've never heard that term used that way before. So they're basically showing up with a gun saying, this is my property, not yours.
Yeah. And you have no one here to say so elsewise because I don't know any of your family members. That was kind of her response to me. Well, I don't know any of her family members. I mean, I have a friend that'll sign and say that. Literally what she said.
You know, if you're going to go be an escrow officer, you got to take some exams. You got to learn some stuff. Yep. If you're going to go be a doctor, you got to go to some schools. You got to pass some tests. Like there's all these different hurdles and thresholds you got to cross to be able to get certain licenses and work in certain fields. But to be a property investor, there is nothing you got to have. It's just an absolute right as an individual to own property. And oh my gosh, because there's so much dollars potentially at stake, I see some of the biggest idiots climb out of the woodwork and say, I'm going to go do this. Oh. All right, we're going to wrap this up. I'm running out of juice today. There's been a lot of talking. But Montiel, I want to thank you for coming on here. When folks want to get a hold of you, first off, why don't you tell them a little bit about how to contact you, a little bit about your business. We haven't really talked about that other than just what business is like, but tell them where you work, how to get a hold of you, stuff like that.
Okay, I work at First Option Title. You can email me at Montiel at First Option Title. That's 1ST, optiontitle.com. You can reach me or my assistants at 936-215-8372. That is a shared cell phone number that rings the whole team. We ask that you just be open-minded to the fact that we are a team processing, and again, a whole team to support your transaction. We go to different people for different things. But yeah, come check us out.
Good. Thanks for sharing that. I will tell you, we do probably 70 or 80% of our transactions go through their office. I don't know how many years I've worked with you, but it's been a lot of years now. We enjoy working with y'all. We think that y'all work well with us. And we thought our companies are a really good match. So I for sure make the recommendation. At this point, if you're operating in Texas, if you're looking at operating outside of Texas, reach out to them and see what their reach looks like at the time and where they're working. But yeah, you get my seal of approval. So
I appreciate it. Oh, I did want to add one thing. So whenever you guys come to me for like underwriting approval or anyone, right, a client, and we give you that blessing, don't use that as a blanket statement because that can hurt you. What
do you mean?
Each transaction's different, right? The facts around a transaction, how it's mitigated is completely different. So don't just take something and run with it. If I could leave you a little tip advice.
All right. Well, that's all we got today. Thanks, Montiel.
Thank you.
My commitment to you is to deliver the most interesting, messy, and profitable real estate deals on earth. And in exchange for that, I only ask that you subscribe to this podcast and share it with a friend who can benefit.